Growing up, I never really understood time, or I never was introduced to calendars.
And it just feels like you're like this, like you're so constricted and you're like confined, like who we are, why we come here, what our purpose is for being here.
What were the first 7 years of somebody's life? What were the cycles that playing out?
Our knowledge of numbers and everything has been inverted. Everything's been inverted.
Just be really receptive when a bird turns up, when a lizard turns up, when you suddenly see this big tree that just you've walked past many times, but suddenly it beams at you like it's a being and it's coming through. That's all communication. When they just say, I'll do a prayer for you, I'm like, but that's really powerful. The word is powerful. There's a resonance in the way we speak, or that we have these sort of themes that play out, and we have to trust that on some level our higher self did choose the theme through our like sound, which is our name.
Welcome everyone to Spiritual Chat Live. I'm Angie Suddath Walsh, and today my guest is Natasha Darling, who has Self-Healing Alchemy, also known as SHA. Natasha is an artist, a poet, a writer, and is musically gifted. She utilizes her gifts to express herself spiritually and what she receives divinely. Her spiritual knowledge is profound. Natasha was born and grew up until age 6 in the Solomon Islands. After moving to Australia, she struggled immensely with the Western culture and influences. It took her many years to be able to communicate the way she does now. One of her passions is discussing our unique human stories, the themes, the cycles, the timelines, our soul's mission here on Earth. Natasha feels it's important for all of us to understand where we began so we understand why we're here now. Welcome, Natasha, and welcome everyone.
Thank you so much, Angie. Such a pleasure to be here, and thanks for everyone for coming.
You just look so beautiful. I just want to say that. You look so beautiful. It's so awesome to have you here, because we've been talking about this for a while. So I'm just so excited to have you. And hopefully this is going to be like a whole series that we're going to have you back so that we can talk about so many profound spiritual things. But today we're going to talk about what you wanted to start with and you're passionate about is our human stories.
Definitely. I wanted to just ask if everyone didn't mind if I just did a prayer. Is that okay? Just start off the...
That'd be nice.
Cool. Great Spirit, we are calling in your support, your love, and your wisdom in the here and now. We ask you to please circle your beautiful divine light around every individual in this sacred space and everyone who is watching the recording as a part of this sacred space. We ask that you please put this beautiful circle of light around all of us as a group consciousness as well. And we ask that you please bring your light through every part of our being, every cell, every organ, and help us step up into your light in more direct ways through our purpose in the here and now. We are so grateful for you bringing us here together today, and we love you so much. Thank you so much, Great Spirit.
Yeah, that was beautiful. I've seen all kinds of really pretty lights, green and gold, and that was beautiful.
That's good. Yeah, I mean, I've been feeling it's always interesting when you come into a group consciousness and you start tuning into the energies leading up, because you start feeling these different sort of elements come in, and it's nice when they come through the prayer, like bringing the prayer helps them come in more directly through everyone's consciousness at the same time, which is a really powerful process.
Did you write that for today, or did you just...
No, that was just intuitive. Yeah, just feeling it out. I was thinking of writing one, and I tuned it in quite a bit, and then I just felt, I was like, no, just see what the energy is on the day and tune in, which is what I kind of did with Star Songs a lot. I just kind of tuned in with that energy in that moment and went with it.
Now, your Star Songs, you have that on SoundCloud and YouTube?
Yeah. So Star Songs is like a series on YouTube that covers kind of a channeling, I guess, through creative practices. And for each episode, I did like an art piece, as well as brought through prayer. And then I also just spontaneously sung, which I did not expect to do for that series. It started coming through quite early on, and then it became a part of the I guess you would say, the preparing of the space. And I had no idea what I was about to sing or not. So it was kind of a bit overwhelming when that started to come in really directly in a really spontaneous way. But that's just the way it is when you work with spirit. On You just have to trust and know that somehow you've been prepared throughout many different timelines in the here and now, and like be in this space through that awareness. So you just have to trust. But I never saw myself as someone who would sing. That's for sure. Like I was like very shy and had difficulties communicating early on because I felt so overwhelmed by the way people would expect things to be communicated, and I didn't have the ability to do that coming from the Solomon Islands. So yeah, that was big thing, starting to sing.
Yeah. Well, I think you have a beautiful voice. I've listened to some of your stuff that you've shared with me, and I think I enjoy it. I love it. Like I can just sit there and I just close my eyes and I just listen. And I love when you play the drums and you have like, and when you put the birds in with it, like Fluffy and some of your birds that are around there, wild birds. It's very cool. So why don't we talk about like your beginnings, like in the Solomon Islands and lead up to where we're going to go with the human stories.
Uh, so yeah, I was, being born in the Solomon Islands. My parents are originally from Australia, but they chose to move to the Solomon Islands, and we're only planning on being there for a couple of years, and ended up staying there, I think, for about 11 years. And I was there for 6 years. And that was an amazing, I'm really grateful for the experience that I had growing up in the Solomon Islands. There were so many things that I was soaking up that I didn't even know any contrast of, because when we're children, we just soak up our experience, whether it's negative or positive. We're taking it entirely in, and we're as babies, we're up to 90% water, so we are so resonant to whatever is around us. So for me, in the Solomon Islands, I was taking in so many different aspects of communication that were not necessarily what this culture in Australia is sort of based around. It was sort of probably more telepathic, more body language, more dance, sound, that I didn't feel the impending pressure of the language in the same way, because it was so accessible in so many different dynamic ways. And yeah, I mean, I was able to kind of navigate my reality quite easily, and I was given a lot of free reign to express my higher will as a child, which I don't know culturally. I was, in Solomon Islands, they see children as kind of like gods, or like they really worship and love children, and they see them as really pure. So as a child, I just knew I was fully and entirely loved unconditionally, and there was no question. And the other thing about that culture is that there's not really like an inherent level of shame in the body. I was used to seeing like naked people, or people dancing without shirts on, and like grass skirts or things like that. So I don't think I ever really understood shame. I would have experienced it from maybe my parents in certain moments, like their like conditioning, but I just had no interest in, there's some stories like I would get in trouble for drawing all over the walls or doing things like that. And, while I was being yelled at, I'd start pulling faces at my parent, and they couldn't help but start to laugh. So I had the ability at a very young age to transform environments like on call through my higher will. So I kind of understood, without knowing it as a child, because you're not necessarily intellectualizing it. And this is in hindsight, obviously. But I kind of had this wisdom that was culminating in my, what we call our subconscious self, because a lot of like theories around our childhood is that we, for the first 7 years, builds our actual kind of subconscious self and the way we instinctually move through the world. So for me personally, my instinct and the way in which I was navigating was full of, unconditional love, understanding that I had a lot of power as a child, that I was fully loved, and that I had the ability to kind of navigate my reality in a very conscious way, even if that's not necessarily an intellectual, an avenue of intellect necessarily. It's more of like a whole body sensory experience.
That's really profound though, because like in the Western culture, I think, when growing up, like most children are in a controlled environment. They're not allowed to be that way. Children are seen, not heard, or they're told how to express their emotions or how to be or how to feel. So that's a very unique way to be able to grow up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think about, I'm really grateful for a lady from one of the tribes, like the local tribes, who took care of me. She was kind of like a second mother. Her name was Melody. And I can just remember her face, like always beaming with such a beautiful big smile. And she just loved me so much, and I just loved her so much. And there was no question of any of that. So if I asked for ice cream by pointing at ice cream for breakfast, she would be like, yeah, you can have ice cream. So I was like, I had a really, really unusual upbringing in that. And my older sister would be like, she can't have ice cream for breakfast. And I would be like, Melody would be like, yes, she can. Like she's perfect and she's a child. So I kind of, that might sound really bratty, like it's misunderstood maybe in this culture, but in that culture, there's just really no reason for things. Everything sort of works in its own timing. And another example of that, growing up, I never really understood time, or I never was introduced to calendars, until I moved to Australia. So I really had no concept of money, and I had no concept of time other than cycles, like natural cycles. When it was day, it was daytime. When it was night, it was nighttime. Like though, and then the tides come in and out. All of those kind of cycles were naturally a part of my environment. So the way in which our system works in Australia is that we work through this like business week, and we work Monday to Friday or Monday to Saturday, and we operate in this time construct which just wasn't apparent in as a child in Solomon Islands. So I had no concept or contrast to even assess things on that level. So obviously moving to Australia was quite overwhelming and quite stressful for me, because suddenly I was expected, because I was like a white kid, and I looked like I'd grown up there, but I had no idea what was going on. Like I was like, I don't get all these rules.
Right. And I think a lot of us spiritually don't understand the rules. I know my mom's in here, so I'm just going to say, like, if I wanted chocolate cake for breakfast, my mom let me have chocolate cake for breakfast. But that's because we never really wanted to have breakfast, so she always wanted us to have something in our stomach before school. So she was like, "Well, okay, it's something in your stomach." But I get what you're saying about like clocks and calendars, because I've gotten better at it, but I think because I've removed myself from the calendar and stuff. When I have to be on the man-made clock and calendar, like tonight when we were doing this, then I know I have to be there. But any other time, like, I don't pay attention to it. So, but for years I had to, and it just feels like you're like this, like you're so constricted and you're like confined, and because it's not natural. So I understand what
Yeah,
you're saying with that. And spiritually, I think that a lot of us that are so, and I'm not saying we're more evolved or anything than other people, but I'm just saying it's not natural and we feel that.
yeah, definitely. And you can see that in the culture. Like you can see why coffee as a drink is so relied upon in the Western kind of culture, because it's actually what helps people get through the high level of productivity, however you want to perceive that, in this, collective consciousness. So, when I think about Solomon Islands in as an experience, the psyche is so different. Whenever you go to a different land or location, there's a different sort of unique psyche that exist as a part of the collective. I guess it's soup. And so when you're dealing with Solomon Islands as an energy, for example, darkness or things that are, monsters or things like that, are part of storytelling. It's not taboo. It's natural. It's you're naturally allowed to explore these different themes, I guess. And then in a more Western mindset, where I guess people are maybe a little bit more not always, but tend to suppress their emotion and focus more on a sort of a mental intellect, that sometimes we make decisions about, with all of these rules, about what's okay, what's not okay to talk about. And I think that's one thing I really struggled. I would say my biggest my biggest wounding was communication once I moved to Australia, even though I had lots of amazing gifts that were really like nourished through the previous culture. When I came here, I was way behind in a totally different way. And I had all of these ways of communicating, but none of them were received. So I was transmitting something that couldn't be received in that psyche. And so that made it really difficult for me to recognize how to even make sense of reality. I call it, in some ways, cultural confusion. I worked with one gentleman who talked about it a lot because he came from the UK and he moved to Australia. And he was older when he moved here. So we were just talking about the funny things that you notice when you come to Australia or when you come to a new culture,
Mhm.
and like how much you have to figure out ways to adapt it socially, and even communicate, how you can say something and everyone looks at you like you're crazy and you're like, oh, okay, people don't talk like that here. Right. Okay. Got it.
I know, I remember one story that you told me about how you would get up in the middle of the night. I think you were like 9 years old and you were getting on the computer and just writing. You want to talk about
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for bringing that up. Yeah, I practiced. It was basically a program on the computer that taught you how to type. And I had such difficulties with English, and I was really dyslexic, and I was writing everything backwards and inside out, and really challenged by it. And I kept getting in trouble at school. And it was like they just couldn't understand that my brain just worked a totally different way. And I was very right brained. And then coming into a more left brain culture, I was sort of constantly in trouble for things that I didn't understand that I was doing wrong. So I found this program on the computer probably when I was about 8 or 9. And I just started like sneaking out continually and practicing typing on this program and learning how to type fast, learning how to spell. Like there was all these sort of aspects within this program that kind of taught me how to deal with spelling and how to type faster. And I was like, well, there's one thing I can be good at, is maybe typing on a computer or writing. But I didn't actually consciously go, oh, I want to be a writer or I want to express poetry necessarily. But I knew that I had such a like a disability in this culture, in terms of like what I'd experienced as a vast reality psychically. I had like a lot of psychic faculties online, but I had no way to communicate them. So I've said to somebody before, I was like, when you're in this culture, when you're in a culture that is, has a certain set of rules and guidelines, you're already in that energy. So you can kind of thrive in that environment. Whether it's positive or negative, it doesn't really matter. It's just part of the system that we've all agreed upon on some level in a culture. And then when coming into this, I was like, I clearly am, got kept down in grade 2. I got kept pushed down to grade 1 at some. So I was like constantly being moved around and being put back in school because I couldn't adapt quick enough, or I couldn't understand what was happening. So the computer was sort of like a really powerful practice that I started to implement. And I didn't even, when I really think about it, my spirit team was definitely just like constantly nudging me towards ways in which I could improve my communication. And that was just very normal for me, coming from the Solomon Islands, having that sort of vast reality, and then coming here. And I was like, right, I've got to put this to use. Like, I've got to figure this communication thing out. I've got to find a way to express myself.
exactly. That's what always gets me about school. I always said school was jail. Even though I liked school, like math was always my nemesis, still is. But, like I've come to have, I always would see numbers. I always loved counting and stuff like that. But like school, it just felt very constrictive. Like, why do I have to go 5 days a week? Why do I have to go for so many years? Like, if they would have school where, like, for, they call people who can't learn, like you were, punished basically because you were dyslexic and you didn't learn like everyone else learned. We all learn differently. If there was this school, where you can go here to learn this way, you can go here to learn this way. It was more of a, like, I don't know, like spiritual school. Like, I just think like we learn things. I see the schools in the future being totally different than what they are now. And I know that's probably going to shock a lot of people, but everything's falling, everything's changing. And it's because we're evolving and raising our consciousness to a higher consciousness. And I'm excited to see what's going to come because everyone in the past, like we've been punished for our gifts, we've been punished for our natural, how we are naturally. And that, like, this is going into our human stories, like who we are, why we come here, what our purpose is for being here. And a lot of us are here for this, what's happening right now.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we've all had to go through some form of really, like, it's like a trauma, trying to learn things that don't feel true for us. But, in saying that, I'm so grateful that I came to Australia because I had to up level on so many levels, like in so many ways. And so in that sense, I'm super grateful that I've had this contrast that I can see, more right brain culture, more left brain culture, and then I've been able to, over time, over a long period of time and practice, figure those things out. But absolutely agree with you, Angie. The school thing, I think it's also just that sense of patience and acknowledging individuality as an actual positive thing rather than it being seen as a negative thing. And I think that's really important, that we all have really unique ways of perceiving reality. And that is what I would call, co-creating with great spirit. We're a spark of great spirit, but we're our own unique expression of great spirit. And we are co-authoring our reality or co-author within our reality. And so therefore that experience of figuring out our narratives, working out what it is that our higher will is guiding us towards in terms of making the best decisions, the more that we embrace who we are as individuals, the more power we have in connecting to a much larger kind of force or presence within life. And I think part of that conditioning is when you cut someone off from their individual spark, it makes it difficult for them to make better choices. And there can be a power dynamic in that.
Exactly. Oh, 100%. Yeah. And that's exactly what's happened for like, what, a millennia? We've all been cut off. And that's where like so many are waking up now and they're like, I do readings for people and stuff where they're like, I went to school for this, but I don't want to do this. Or, some have just graduated from school and they don't want to do what they're doing, or they've been doing their career for a while and they're like, this isn't what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm supposed to be doing something else, but I don't know what it is. People are literally waking up. So where can we go with this? Where can we go with this conversation so we can help people understand what's happening and where they're supposed to go? Because it is their human story. It's part of this. This is their awakening that's happening.
Definitely. I really feel like our human stories are our soul's expression in the human reality, in our human experience. And when we look at the first 7 years of our life, usually we can this is how I would think of, from a liquid crystal practitioner perspective, I always look at what were the first 7 years of somebody's life, what were the cycles that playing out, because your soul has very carefully navigated some of these circumstances, and whether they're really negative or really positive or in the middle, whatever they happen to be, on some level, on a soul level and not necessarily on a human perspective level, we have this wisdom that comes through some of those experiences, and we learn, we train, I call it training. So my experience with Solomon Islands was a form of training for my right side of my brain as a human, and to be able to connect with what it is that I was later on, like 30, 40 years later, was meant to bring through. But it just takes many different layers of lessons and learnings to be able to get to that place where you can finally express that. But with our human stories, we also have to recognize that when in those first 7 years, if we don't sort of decode some of the cycles that are playing out or some of the themes that were playing out, sometimes it can be more convoluted like later on in other parts of our life, and we don't realize where that comes from. So for example, if I wasn't able to recognize in hindsight that I had difficulties coming to a new culture, that would make it difficult for me to live my soul purpose later on in life. So I had to figure out where were my challenges, where are my greatest shadows, and the things that really were almost excruciating to get through because of the way in which I was perceiving them or the way in which they were unfolding for me. And so when I look back and I see all these little moments where I was really drawn to communication, and I can see that there was, for example, my older sister had a typewriter when she was typing up, when it was before computers kind of came in, for her assignments, and I was really drawn to the typewriter. I never used it, but there was something pulling me to that object because it was a form of, it was a symbol of what it was that I was drawn to in life. And I think when we look at all these little tiny moments, they seem really small, but when you actually sit with them and you redefine them, I guess reflect on them, or you go back into them, you realize I was already knowing that writing or communication, through art, for example. I did a lot of art as a child in Solomon Islands. And then art then became something that helped me cope with this new culture because it was very right brained. No one really could judge it. And if they did, it was kind of, I was a child. So whatever, like you can't really do anything about it. You're just expressing something. And then as I got older, I realized how important it was to stay true to the things that had helped me through those really challenging times. So I think it's always really like some people don't have the luxury of having activities or experiences that have like nourished them. They might have come through, a lot of abuse or really difficult circumstances, but they have really strong gifts in being able to get through all of those things. And there's obviously something within all of those experiences that puts them on their path later on in life. And you just hope that they can, pull that, I call it mining, like mining into the story, mining into your experience, and actually really delving into and I think you could call it recalibrating, or going into a perspective and then expanding upon it, and then recognizing and letting that part of you speak to yourself. So when I talk, when I'm tuning in with that 6-year-old who moved to Australia, I'm letting her speak to me about how hard that was, because I don't think she had a place to express that once she moved to Australia. No one really talked about it. So that part of me was sort of shut down to a degree. There was a fragmentation that occurred. And so going into that aspect of me, asking my younger self, how did you feel? Are you okay? Like, what do we need to do to resolve this? And then look at what did you do to cope with that? And then I realized, oh, she, that part of me, she tuned in with art. She found ways to, listen to people really observantly. She didn't speak a lot because she was afraid of saying the wrong thing, but at the same time, she listened very deeply. So those parts of me, I can bring into my adult self and go, wow, there's some really amazing gifts in that, even if they were through difficult circumstances.
100%. And a lot of things that you say, I probably wouldn't have been able to put the pieces together as well as like when you talk about being a liquid crystal practitioner and like the way you do things like it's in the sevens with the seven chakras. And then when you're talking about like when we come in, like you talk about being it's a directive 3 or a directive 1 or a directive 6. When you're talking about those different things, it it really matches up to numerology. And like a lot of
Yeah.
Georgina Grace says in her numerology courses, like I'm giving her a little shout out here, but like her, I wouldn't be able to, if I hadn't done her courses and like understood the numbers for what they really are, what you're talking about, I wouldn't have been able to understand as deeply and as completely as I do. I would have had to have you explain things so much more. So because like our knowledge of numbers and everything has been inverted. Everything's been inverted. So it's like people like you or Georgina, like everyone, like we're all coming forward to help people unlearn everything that we've been taught.
Yeah, and reorganize it. Like it's sort of like some of those things are still relevant, like that you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Like you've got to make the most of every experience you've had, even if it is a terrible experience. On some level, you had the strength to get through it. So clearly your soul was guiding you some way. But if you're, still able to get through it, and if you didn't get through it and you have to get through it later on, then your soul is still guiding you. So there's still that presence there. But when you talked about mathematics and school and your nemesis, Angie, I was like, oh gosh, if they just brought numerology into schools, taught
Yeah,
it like that, it would be a completely different experience.
you're right.
All the kids that struggle so much with that
Yeah,
would be like thriving, because it would be so much more interdimensional and like into perspective. I guess you kind of look at many different ways of looking at numbers, and they come alive then, rather than it just being this data and this outcome based kind of practice that we have been kind of conditioned to think of numbers as.
yeah. And a lot of us, all of us have suffered trauma. We've all went through things. And, you know, uh, shamans, they believe those are those are like trials that you have to go through on your journey. So, and some of them are quite hard, and you have like have deaths, you have near deaths, you die and you come back, and you talk about that a lot, that you've had many near death experiences, and you even talk about like the moon cycles. You say because you were born on the which moon is it? The new moon?
It's just as the new moon comes out. When you look at the moon cycle and you type in when your birth date kind of coincides with where the moon was. I believe that when what that moon was is our rebirth point every 28 days or 29 days. So whenever it's a new moon for me at the like beginning part of the crescent, I know that just before that I'm going through a death process. I'm clearing something out, I'm letting something go, and then I'm stepping into a new 28 to 29 day cycle. And so that can be really powerful, because sometimes you can be like, what is going on? Like, why am I feeling so intense? Or what is going on? And then I go, oh, okay, well, not only is it the dark moon, which is a time to go through that sort of, I guess, a void or a doorway of death, I guess, or a letting go. But for me, that's actually also where my birth date coincides with. So I think it's really important to understand our cycles. And in the liquid crystals, working with Justin's work, he's a lot of my practices over the last 13 years with that body of work has kind of helped me really tune into, for example, their dosage is 7 drops in the morning, 7 drops at night, 1 drop for each chakra in the masculine, 1 drop for each chakra in the feminine, 3 drop dose if it's an acute dose. You take that for 21 days. It's a 28-day process, because once you finish the 21 days of taking the remedy, you have 7 days integration period where you move through each chakra and you're actually integrating what work you've just done. And after doing as much as I have in terms of the liquid crystals and taking so many different frequencies, I've just been able to sort of interdimensionally explore where I'm at in certain energies and recognize it from a physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual level, like not just projecting where I'm at, but actually being tested on those different bodies, or those different expressions of self in those realms. And so you really know, like if you have, for example, a trinity, which you take, crystal 1 on day 1, crystal 2 on day 2, crystal 3 on day 3, and crystal 1 on day 4, and you keep that cycle going for 21 days, you really start to see what crystal shows up for you or where you have the most difficulties. And it's like very humbling. It's a good process to go through, because it's not just, you think you're taking something that's just changing you, but it changes your whole reality. It even affects the people around you. So people will get annoyed at you without knowing why, because your energy or frequency is shifting, and that causes them to have to go through a synchronized shift as well, especially if it's family or bloodline, because that's just like a given. That's just what happens. Even if you don't have any direct contact with them, when you do that work on yourself, or you are shifting through old stories, or even mining through your past and recognizing your story as a human being, that is actually clearing the way for your ancestors and your lineage, or the people that you're connected to. And they won't like that very much in certain circumstances, but that's just what we're here for. That you can't get into a comfort zone, which I would call a rut at times on earth, and expect to stay there. Like, things change, we have to evolve, we have to move through different things. And there are a lot of things that I have difficulties with change, like I'm a very free spirit, very dynamic, but I still have that fragmentation of moving from the Solomon Islands to Australia. Even if that is a huge wisdom, there's still sometimes overwhelm, for example, of moving house or doing things that involve a huge change. On one hand, I'm really excited. On the other hand, I'm like, oh, there's a part of me from 6 years old that just wants to tell me something, and she's feeling a bit insecure. How do I nurture that aspect of me? How do I, all the other aspects of me that are communicating to me about this one change? And how do we come into harmony within this continual evolution, or what you call, I think you've talked about the evolving consciousness, and how we're moving into a different timeline.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So why don't you tell people what about the liquid crystals? Because people are probably thinking, what are you doing with liquid? Are you taking a crystal and making it liquid, or tell us about that.
Well, I guess in Justin's work, he has the sort of domain of creating the mother stock of the liquid crystals, and that is a sort of a process that is in nature. He hasn't shared that process with the collective. I'm sure he will at some stage, but it obviously requires the right timing and space for that to come through. But I would then, as a practitioner, receive a stock bottle, and then from the stock bottle, I'm making the remedies for somebody, for a client or whatnot. And so basically it's kind of like it's like a potent, it's almost like homeopathy in the sense that it's watered down, but at the same time, the potency of the spiritual effect on the body is actually quite high, because by the time you get the remedy, it's not a frequency on its own. Like when you've made the remedy is like an unfinished recipe until that person takes those 7 drops. And once that person takes those 7 drops, the recipe becomes like more complete because it's through this alchemical process of the individual human that is experiencing. So you could take the same crystal over and over again for 21 days, then 7 days integration, then 21 days, and you'll have unique experiences every time. Even if you're in the same frequency, you're going deeper and deeper and deeper into that resonance. So I'm Capricorn moon and sun, and I'm always about repeating cycles and really witnessing things play out continually and going deep into them and slowing the process down and really understanding what I'm actually learning, not just jumping around. I have no problem with that, and it's totally fine because that's part of the contrast. But some remedies I know that will be most needed for me to keep working with in a really deep level, because our blood has, for example, 77 minerals, and it's like a chain of, I guess, spirit, the building blocks of our creational expression as humans. And when we have one of those little links in the chains not active in our blood, it means we can't actually connect with that frequency. There's like a blind spot, but we won't know it's necessarily a blind spot. We might think we're really good at that energy. We might really on a projected level, but it's when you take it that you start seeing all these things, blow up in your life, and you're like, okay, like I need to work with this crystal. I need to keep coming back to this crystal. So I think, for example, the first crystal that I worked with really deeply was rhodochrosite, and that the simple purpose in liquid crystal perspective is self-love. And I just really felt like that was so important part of healing for me. It was like learning to accept myself because I'd been such an outsider in a culture. And I'm sure we all, like, it's not just an individual thing, it's a collective thing. We all, connecting with self-love is never going to, take us astray. It's always going to help us find a deeper connection to spirit. But it was so nourishing for me. I just was like, whenever the practitioner was like, do you want to move to a different one? I was like, no, I want to go back to rhodochrosite again and do it again. And it really just helped me anchor into that frequency in a really deep way. So I think that's a good example of where, frequencies can be exciting to try all these different things, but it's really important to figure out where you're most challenged. And if you can tap into that frequency, you can turn your greatest challenge into your greatest gift.
Sounds a lot like it sounds like what I do with the soul healing coaching, but in a different way, because it's healing you. The liquid crystals are healing you in a frequency, and you are doing work, but you're not doing work like how, like what I do is have you, like, we release emotions, and you're recognizing the emotions, you're putting it to like a caused by or connected to, and maybe it's connected to or caused by a past life experience or whatever, like we're releasing it that way. This is like, it's a different way to do it, and maybe doing those two together would be even more profound. Like, it just sounds like it would, because there's always, I always say, like, healing's like an onion, like there's always layers, because even when you think you've gotten to a place where you're like, yeah, I'm healed from that or whatever, and then, like, this is a 9 year and there's things that are coming up and you're like, wait a minute, I healed from that. What is this? Why is this representing? Because it's another layer. It's like dust bunnies in there. You got to clear those out. But it's much easier to clear out the dust bunnies than when you initially go through and start doing all the healing. Right?
Yeah, I've never heard dust bunnies, by the way. That must be like, I love that. When you were bringing in the word bunny, like I was thinking of chrysocolla, because chrysocolla is connected to rabbit. So when you were saying that, I was like, okay, great, awesome, thank you for bringing that Divic message through. But yeah, absolutely. I think the one thing I really love about the liquid crystals and what I've learned so much from that modality is that as a practitioner, my job is to listen to what people are saying, listen to the symbols, listen to the things that they're offering me. They might not even realize that they're offering me these symbols. They might be scratching their face at a certain point whenever they say a certain word, or there's just all of these like subconscious ways in which the body is communicating with the conscious self, or the unconscious to subconscious to the conscious, and how these parts of ourselves are all sort of in cahoots and like figuring out what we're most comfortable with, what we're willing to accept, what we're not willing to accept, and trying to get the message across. And so often people are receiving messages, but they're not necessarily, the issue isn't that they're not receiving messages, it's that they're not able to translate the messages. And translation takes a lot of creative free will, like free will. You have to be willing to learn new ways of expression. You have to be willing, coming from the Solomon Islands, I'm witnessing so many different forms of communication. And so coming into this culture, I had a lot of insight to the way people would use their body language, the way people would use their tone, to shut a conversation off because they were suppressing their own emotion or whatnot. So those experiences were really useful in working with the liquid crystals. But definitely you could work with people, but you got to remember too, people have their frequencies that they're masterful at. So when you're guided towards working with someone, you're usually working with certain crystals or certain frequencies through that person. So that person will have not only their soul essence or their soul frequency, but they have their, gifts that they have in that they've mastered certain minerals that you might not be so great at, but the practitioner or the person that you're working with as a counselor or therapist or however has a specific energy that you are learning through that human experience. And I think that's like, so it depends on what you're needing and where you need to draw your energy to get that experience and to be fully embodied within that.
So if someone's watching this and they're thinking, well, I need to start doing work on myself. I need to start figuring out what my soul purpose is. Where do they begin?
I mean, personally, I would start praying on it. That would be the first place I would go to, is that your voice and you're an instrument, and your body is like a sword. I say your word is your sword. How will you wield it? And your body is an expression of this instrument or this connection with Great Spirit as an instrument. And so, praying on things will actually start to align you to that energy. You don't necessarily have to have all the answers to move forward in any direction. You just have to be willing to have change. And I think that's something that people sometimes forget. And also looking at where you are resistant to moving forward. You don't have to be hard on yourself in any way, but if there's a real trauma that somebody has experienced that really prevents them from wanting to let new people into their life, for example, then it's going to be difficult for them to be able to co-create with another person in an ease-filled way. So the first thing I would do is pray on it. I'd be like, Great Spirit, I have difficulties. Just open up and just be, I have difficulties with communicating with other people, or I have difficulties in co-creating with other people, and I don't know where to start. Can you please show me the way? And be really receptive when a bird turns up, when a lizard turns up, when you suddenly see this big tree that just you've walked past many times, but suddenly it beams at you like it's a being and it's coming through. That's all communication. And so it can be as simple as a tree. It can be simple as walking past somebody and hearing them. For example, last night went for a walk, usually really quiet on a Saturday night, and I'd been tuning in with Orion, the Stargate, the star system, the last week. And I'd been kind of getting messages about Orion, which is a really special kind of energy around polarity. And it's also about learning how to embrace your dark light and your white light as one, and learning how to integrate and embody those aspects of self. And I realized there was a little group of like young kind of teenagers that were all looking at the sky. And then this one girl said Orion like 4 times. She's like, that's Orion, that's Orion, that's Orion. I was like, started giggling because I didn't just get the message once. I got it multiple times in like a few seconds. And I thought, oh, wow, that's an echo of spirit just really letting me know that whatever I'm interacting with in life is interacting with me, and to look in the spaces between rather than just what's plain in your face. Even though that was really direct, there are lots of messages that come through that are much more subtle, and it can be as simple as a light suddenly flashing on the wall, that doesn't normally, land there, and you suddenly see it, and there's sort of maybe a silhouette of a bird, or maybe there's like a really beautiful diamond colored, like a reflective kind of eminence, and it's even those things are messages. You don't have to understand intellectually what they mean. You just have to say, got it, like whatever that is, keep it coming. Like, I don't know what that means, can you define that more? Like, you do this a lot, Angie. You have conversations with spirit, and you constantly are like, if I want this, if you could tell me what this is, could you please show me this bird? And you'll see it, or you won't see it, whatever. But
Yeah, I do that all the time. I've told you how many times and I ask for the craziest things sometimes, because if I've already asked and I've received the answer and I'm just like, I don't know if that's true or not. Like, I don't know if that's accurate. So I'll ask for, have a cardinal fly right in front of me. And like, here comes a cardinal. And I'm like, okay, but the thing is you're not making that bird fly in front of you. You're open to receive, but you're also open to not receive. You're neutral. You're not expecting it, but you're not expecting it. So
Totally.
and I think like what people don't understand too, and this is like where I'm coming to a lot of conversations with people as well, is that the shadow work that you have to do is so important because we all have light and dark inside of us, and the shadow side will cover the light. So when you do that inner work, whether it's with liquid crystals or doing, your inner soul work, it's balancing the light and dark within you. And as you do that, you're going to balance the light and dark in the world. And I've been trying to explain this to people, and I think sometimes I don't know, I think I talk over people's heads sometimes, and I don't mean to, but we since we all are light and dark, and this may be hard for people to understand, but like the dark that's in the world, it is a reflection of us as well. So like we are light, once we conquer that, it's like we take it on, right? Because we heal it, we take it on, and it's not there anymore. So it's like it's a balance. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. I definitely understand what you're saying. For me, I personally see light and dark as both light energy. We just don't recognize darkness as light. So
Right.
it's when if you look at your unconscious and your conscious self, your unconscious self isn't evil. It's a reservoir which is vast and cosmic and sentient. But our conscious mind can only perceive so much. And so our conscious mind can delve into that unconscious aspect and sort of dive into different things, but it has to be appropriate. It has to make sense. When we haven't mastered something, we will perceive it as evil in a way. And I'm not negating anyone's experience of evil human beings. I'm not necessarily talking about that. I'm talking more about like when, for example, if someone loves something, they're more drawn to it. They usually are afraid of the thing that is the opposing force of that. And so they'll be like, I love this. Like an example would be some people tell me, I love this crystal. This crystal, I've got so many of these crystals. Usually that means, and this is something that I've heard Justin talk about in the liquid crystals, he's like, that's usually what you need most. It's not necessarily like it's a crystal that you actually suck at, so if you're constantly drawn to it, it's because there's something that you might be good at it in certain ways, but you might also be avoiding something. But it's also about sorry, understanding what we love and what we don't like, what we dislike, and recognizing where we have mastery and where we don't. For example, I didn't like communicating openly like when I was a child because it was difficult for me. And so therefore I had every reason to kind of find ways to not do that because I wasn't masterful in this culture. In the Solomon Islands, I could do it with ease and grace, and it was simple. In this culture, I wasn't. So it makes sense that I would eventually be someone who communicates as part of my purpose because I've had to work through so much challenge to get to a point of mastery to be able to express myself the way that I am. So and to have this reservoir of all of these other ways of communicating and going, well, what's the most appropriate way to help to tell people or show people how to express themselves in more diverse or more dynamic ways. But it was really challenging for me, so the thing that we are most challenged by are things that can become gifts, but we need to spend time in that energy and actually like sort of work through whatever it is that we're avoiding within it or we're not so good at. If you're not good at riding a bike, then you're going to avoid riding a bike. It's just, but it takes courage to go and pick up that bike and go, okay, well, I'm not good at it, but I'm going to keep practicing. And that to me is where like all of the experiences I've had, even with near death experiences or going through, immense dis-ease processes, have taught me like before I go into it, I can project so much fear into it. And when I actually go through it, I'm like, I've got this. It's so above my head. I don't even know if I'll make it. But there's a certain point where something clicks, and I'm like, just keep in momentum of whatever this is requiring you to be in. And I know you understand that, Angie, like very, very deeply.
Oh yeah. I think, well, I both of us, we've both stared death in the face um several times. And I don't know, like I know you're like this too. We have a determination where we're not going to let it win, but we're also like, well, if this is how I'm going to go out, then I'm at least going to go out fighting and know that I gave everything I had. But in the end, like, I mean, I always said, like with Lyme disease, I always said, well, it's not over till the fat lady sings. Like, and even then, if she's singing, I'm still gonna throw limes at her because I'm still gonna fight no matter what. And I know I was talking with someone earlier today, and they were asking how I was doing. I'm like, I'm doing so much better, and I'm like, I'm down to like my maintenance protocol, and it's just like, these 7 or 8 little things. And I said, it's much better than when I used to do like 12 to 14 hours a day of stuff. And she was like, what? And I'm like, well, yeah, but that's how you beat it. It's that kind of intensity. And that's what you're talking about. Like it's that kind of determination, that kind of intensity, that kind of courage. And that's what will get you through the dark. Do you,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's just realizing that okay, I'm not so good at this particular area in my life, but it doesn't mean that my will, my higher will, if I keep calling in that higher will, won't guide me. Every step, everything that I went through that seemed like there was no pathway. If I wanted there to be a pathway, and I said to Spirit, I'm willing to walk this path, a solution would open up. And I think sometimes we tend to project a problem before it's even happened, or we try to solve a problem that hasn't even manifested in our reality yet. And I think sometimes it's better just to be like, actually, I have trust in my connection with spirit. I have trust in my ability to make good choices. And whenever I'm worried about making bad choices, I'll say to spirit, help me make the best choices. Like, please, because I don't know if I'm in the best choice making space. But if you just help me recognize what a good choice is in times where I don't have the ability to recognize that, then I'm always going to find a way through that situation. And so there's many times where I could have definitely left this physical experience and reincarnated or left for good, but I just kept thinking, well, okay, like if there's a will, there's a way. And I really believe in that statement, because will is everything. If you learn how to make really good choices in each moment, and you're not letting other people's scripts, like in terms of family, the societal scripts in terms of culture, direct our attention continually, and we don't try to serve a script that is really not necessarily our truth. And that's okay if people do. It's fine. It's part of the life and human choices that we make. But there's a certain point, I think, when you realize, hey, like this is all an illusion. So why would I follow a script that doesn't feel right for me? It makes me feel really constricted or contracted. And that's what it is, contract. Sometimes you can be in a contract with a script and not even fully realize how much it's limiting your soul purpose and your potential, and you have to throw it off. And often for me, if I realize that, say for example, someone's treating me disrespectfully, or I realize that I realize I've been putting up with certain things in life, that I will say to spirit, I will not put up with this anymore. This needs to be sorted, and I am willing to walk the way to get through this. And often I don't have to necessarily take action immediately. By praying on it, it allows a situation that is perfect for me to sort of kind of form in the most perfect way. And I'll realize as I'm in it, I'm like, this is what I asked for. And okay, yeah, this is perfect for my higher good. I can move through this. I just got to take it step by step, and then rest in between and just observe the signs that are happening around me.
100%. Now you have went through a lot of health struggles and difficulties like I have. What do you think, how do you think that plays into the human stories of people that have been like, I know we've talked about this privately, but I want to just kind of talk about it on here because we are talking about the human stories, and a lot of people, why would I come here to be sick? Why would I come here to have health problems, or even like trauma, to go through trauma and stuff? So
Yeah, definitely. Look, manifestation is manifestation. A table is a disease process. A mirror is a disease process. Everything that is material is in some ways uncomfortable to a degree because it's dense. It's manifested in that form. So I don't see an illness as any different to a table. A table has a purpose. You can eat at the table. It serves you perfectly. Sometimes you don't like the table. Sometimes it makes like it makes sort of like certain noises or things like that, but it serves a purpose. And I think dis-ease processes serve a purpose. If you have the higher will and you have the connection to great spirit, and you really believe in the ability to walk a life full of miracles, you will see them so often in all manifestation processes. And I think I don't really judge people. I've had a lot of comments sort of made to me at times in sort of more new age perspectives around spirituality, and they'll be like, oh, you must have done something terrible in a past life, or and I understand that this idea of karma, which is really is your own expression and things that waves of cycles that are playing out, similar to when you're born, where the moon cycle is, and just how that will play out as a particular kind of play in your life. So with dis-ease processes, I think that there's so much to be gained from any purpose in life. And when you live, one example is when we're born, for us to be born, we come through a sound, and that sound is our name, and our name is our purpose. And that purpose has a numerological frequency and bandwidth, and it is something that we want to embrace to be in this experience. When we are babies, the first thing we do is we listen. We have our eyes closed, we listen to the frequency of people's voices and tones. And then when eventually we open our eyes and we start to see what that looks like with our physical eyes, and then then after watching for a long time, we then start to speak. And it really does come in that order. So when it comes to like going through living your purpose, it's about recognizing what is resonating with you through sound, through what you're seeing around you, and then learning how to communicate that reality to be able to create a bridge between you and other people. So when it comes to illness, I just think that it's the same thing. Whatever title you've been given in terms of illness, it's a series of symptoms, and these series of symptoms aren't necessarily defining you. They're not who you are. They're a series of experiences that are teaching you how to build discipline in one way or another. I'm glad. I'm so sorry. Yeah, thank you so much.
Yep.
My other computer completely just died. Like it won't even turn back on. It's gone.
Crazy. That's crazy. I paused the recording and I shouldn't have, because Belinda was given like a testimony, and I had the recording paused, and it was like phenomenal because she was talking about the liquid crystals and the healing circles that she did with you, and just like the profound stuff that it was really cool, and I didn't get it on camera. So not on the recording.
It's
So
in spirit. It's all
yes,
good. Thank you so much, Belinda.
she was really sweet woman. So she said she was going to reach out to you. She had to leave, and Anastasia had to leave. So, but we
Fair
still
enough.
got
Yeah.
Peter, Holly, and my mom, Linda.
Thank you so much, guys. I'm sorry. It took so long. I had to actually sign into a new computer that had recently died, and then do all the upload stuff. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening. But anyway, that's cool.
It's so weird too, because I was thinking before we did the live, I was like, and I wonder if we're going to have any technical difficulties, because I don't know why. I just was thinking it, and I was like, no, we're not going to have anything. Nothing's going to happen. And then it happened. So
Yeah.
it's okay. It's okay. It all worked out.
It's all good.
It's all good.
Yeah.
So
we were talking about disease processes, and like how they actually sort of a purpose in themselves, and that they kind of teach us discipline and navigating our reality. And there's a lot of mastery that can be had through dis-ease process, which I think human experience is fairly uncomfortable. Let's be honest.
But I mean, like you said, you learned so much. Yeah, it's horrific to have to go through the things that you have to go through with a dis-ease. All the things that I went through, that you've went through, it's been horrific, severe trauma. But I can say I've learned so much, and I know you have too. And I love to help people. I don't want anyone to have to go through this. There's people that's still struggling, and I try to help them. And it's just that, I don't know. I think it gives you, I've always had compassion and empathy for people, but I think it goes even deeper, because you remember where you were in your darkest times. And when you come across people that are like that, you have even more compassion and more empathy. And especially like with Lyme, like today I saw a post of someone asking for prayers for someone because they have Lyme disease, and they went off the rails. Lyme affects your brain, and you will do things or say things or act ways that are very unlike you or uncharacteristic of you, or even uncharacteristic of a normal person, normal, like, because it's in your brain. And so I just took a moment to say a prayer for the person, because it's really, it's just a really, really sad thing. And people are trying to get well. They're trying to get better, and plus there's just so much other stuff going on in the world right now. We've got the Ascension, we've got a 9-year, we've got all of this stuff happening. It's just, it's a very heavy time. Very heavy time.
Yeah. I think like a lot of if you look at ancient texts and things that talk about people that walk the way, and it's always been on some level really tough for any human. I think that the human experience is just a really challenging process for spirit to express itself through, but there's obviously a lot of rewards within the process, not just for our own selves and our own family lineage, but also for spirit. So I you know there is if you think about some of the things that we know, we can access each other immediately, whereas it would have taken 3 months to have a basic letter written back and forth and sent to each other. So it's all relative, but at the moment it definitely feels like there's a convergence of many different realities existing and being acknowledged at once. And that makes it very overwhelming for people. And so when you've got a dis-ease process, you're also then usually a parent, and you're doing all these other jobs and you're doing all these other things that you're meant to live up to in this reality, which works, productively very fast. And I think also when it comes to illness or trauma or anything that we're struggling with, it is our greatest challenge becomes our greatest gift. It's not an easy path to walk, and it takes a lot of courage, but it does require you to continually be surrendering to, I guess, your higher will, and learning how to trust in that presence in that way, and learning how to go, okay, well, this is just another lesson, another bump on the road, and another way to figure out how to live in this world from a spiritual perspective into the human experience. So yeah, definitely what you're saying is true. And prayer is so powerful. I've heard sometimes people not really understand prayer. They're like, oh, when they ask for prayers, or when they just say, I'll do a prayer for you, I'm like, but that's really powerful. The word is powerful. There's a resonance in the way we speak. Or even just saying, I'll do a prayer for you, you're actually saying to spirit, I'm taking note of what's going on. If you drive past somebody who's broken down, and say you aren't equipped to be able to help them physically, but doing a prayer for that person is exceptionally powerful. Asking for the right energy and the right person to come and help them, and you'll usually see someone pull up and start to sort of support that person, and it's a really nice vision to see, because that it's a co-creative experience. We're not in this alone. We're shared with many different aspects of spirit in individual expression as one.
Words are powerful. Be careful what you say.
or if you say it, know that there's a temporary element to it, and work through it. Don't be afraid to speak up either. Sometimes we just don't get it right, and sometimes we they're powerful, but we can also we can recount what we're saying and say sorry, or we can say, Great Spirit, I just got that so wrong. I really just ask for your support in helping me figure out the right way to move through that situation. So we can fix things.
There's been people say to me, well, I've prayed before and my prayer didn't come true. And I'm like, well, maybe it did, because an unanswered prayer is an answered prayer. And, and I always say too, rejection is protection. So it's not, just because something didn't happen the way you wanted it to, there was a reason. So,
And it's all divine timing. There's some aspects of life that we have to master before we step in. We're not ready. We're actually being looked after by, like you said, rejection is protection. Like, we're being looked after, not ready for that at this time. Like, there's lots of things that when I'm really unwell that I want in that wellness, I want to feel better, but it's a process, and everything in the human experience is its own alchemical process. We have to just do the best we can with what we've got. We don't always have all the tools that will help us through, but if we keep praying on it, we usually find that people turn up, or tools turn up, or situations sort of suddenly transform, and you surprise yourself, and you suddenly feel a lot, different about something. So yeah, it's so relative to where we are at and the way in which we're willing to clear the path within ourselves. Because to be honest, if I'm really looking at it from a spiritual perspective, everything is clear. the obstacles are our own projections often. And that could be a projection from past lives, or it could be a projection that through lineage belief systems. Then they don't really have to exist necessarily in that way, but they do because we have something to work through. Right. So rejection is projection. I like when you said that, because I was like, yeah, that's true. It's learning to trust in sometimes the things that do take longer to come, or that don't come at all.
And sometimes it takes you many years to figure out that you were being protected when you were rejected. So
I think like there's one thing I noticed with the current trend is all about manifestation. And I think people misinterpret manifestation a lot from my perspective. I just think people think that they can just have anything that they want at any time. And in a spirit realm, yes, like that everything is potential and you can have that opportunity to have anything. But is it really in your soul mission? Is it really in your purpose in life to have some of these experiences at that time? You know, I leave those things up to Great Spirit, because there's things that I might, as from a human perspective, be caught up in glamour around or illusion around. And I might not know that I'm in my own way to my actual soul purpose. So I just kind of always remind myself, like, just because you can manifest anything doesn't mean anything is good for me. Like there are certain things that are more relative to me, and then I have to look at where I've come from, the story that I've been living in cycles, whether it's the 7-year cycle, whether it's the moon cycle every 28 days, whether it's in each day we are reborn and then we, you know, pass over and then come back into the next lifetime every day, whether it's every year when it's your birthday, how all these little cycles or big cycles that are playing out, even cosmically through multiple lifetimes, that we have these sort of themes that play out. And we have to trust that on some level our higher self did choose the theme through our like sound, which is our name, and that theme has specific lessons and specific gifts, and we're obviously choosing that from spirit for a reason, you know. So my name Natasha is my purpose. It has a numerological aspect and it has a higher tone and a lower tone, and if I go astray from that, I'm going to be taking on a whole bunch of problems that my soul isn't even choosing necessarily to take on as purposes. And it just gives me more homework, you know, more things to do. So it is important to kind of stay true to some of the lessons that you might not like being in, but some of them actually are part of the experience of what it is your purpose in life is. And the way you got to think about the impact that you have on other people. Sometimes we can't measure that. You know, I can't measure the impact that I have on other people. Sometimes I don't want to do certain things, but if I was trying to measure and like calculate everything, it would actually sometimes block me from moving forward. Whereas if I just trust that, okay, well, whoever this is meant to speak to, whatever this is meant to do, I trust in spirit guiding me through that presence. It's like, okay, well, I'll trust that why I didn't have that thing manifest at the time that I thought it was going to be most relevant, because I thought I knew better, you know?
Well, in manifesting too, like you have to clear a lot of things out of the way. You know, you have to do the inner work on yourself. You have to clear out the trapped emotions. You have to set boundaries. You got to step into your own power so that you have to be a clear channel to source. There's so many things that go into the art of manifesting, because we've had everything, like, I don't know, everything's been poured, like had everything poured on top of us. So we're covered up. So you have to uncover everything. So you uncover who you are and step into that so you can manifest.
Yeah.
And it's also like believing that you can do it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think people like manifesting is bringing something down from spirit into physicality. Yes. Healing is bringing something from physicality up to spirit. Yes. So, you know, you don't always want manifestation. Sometimes you actually want to clear the way and clear the path and stop calling in things in the physical, because a lot of the time our idea of what we need in the physical is still limited. You know, energy is energy, and then we perceive it as material plane. So I just kind of am always like, oh, there are a lot of things that need healing for us to even know what to manifest, because we need to clear the path to even know what it is that we're wanting to fill the path with. And I think sometimes people just think it's this like flippant thing that you can just manifest this car or do this. And I'm not denying that people are allowed to have abundance. That's not, in any way being negated in terms of a concept, but it's recognizing what's really relevant and what you really need. I often ask people, do you feel abundant? And they'll say, Oh yeah, I think so. Like, am I meant to focus on money more? I was like, no. Do you have the funds or the support in all different forms, not just money, when you need it most? And they're like, yeah. And I was like, well, you're really abundant then. You're living an abundant life. Like, you don't need to have heaps in your bank account to be wealthy. You can live by being in tune with life as an alignment.
Yes, 100%. I agree with you. So my mom had a question. She was asking about, we were talking about this while you were having computer issues, is what is in the liquid crystals? Is it like when you make an elixir with the crystal where you put it in the water and it takes, no? Okay.
No. So Justin talks about this, and I hopefully can do it justice by communicating it. When he brought together, for example, clear quartz as a mother stock, he had to get a piece of clear quartz from every location on the planet that had naturally, as an earth gift, given to us, not ones that we had like mined, ones that had been naturally like pushed out and given. And so through that continue like that process, he had to collect a piece of clear quartz from every location around the world, because a crystal on its own is a local diva depending on where it's from. So if it's from Africa in a certain location, it holds a specific energy at its in a specific place. He had to bring together all of those divas, those local divas, because when we went through a fall of consciousness a long while ago, a lot of that was fragmented to protect us from doing harm to ourselves and each other, because there are safeguards on earth that protect us from doing things that aren't necessarily helpful or useful or even part of our consciousness, and we can set those kind of triggers off and then cause ourselves to go through a de-evolution to a degree. So the clear quartz would have to be brought together, all these different pieces in the one place, and then from there I remember him talking about walking down certain hallways, which were the devic hallways, and he would see whether the crystal diva, the actual arc diva, like kind of like an angel, a nature angel of that crystal, was sitting on the throne. If it was sitting on the throne, the wholeness was already like within that crystal was put together. If it wasn't sitting in the throne, he needed to gather more crystals or certain pieces to kind of bring it together. It was a long process. The crystals have been around for 25 years already, like as a modality. And before that, he spent a long time putting all the pieces together. So to get the mother stock, you're actually working with the arc diva when you're taking it as a client, or as a practitioner. You're making the client a remedy that gives them full connection with that arc diva. And that arc diva, there's a hierarchical aspect to all of spiritual realms, as you know, Angie, and like all of these different things. So those things might trickle down, and then you'll have local divas visit you through the form of an animal, or you'll have local divas show you messages through that crystal that is connected to an animal or a plant or something like that. But it's the arc diva that you're actually having a connection with. And it's actually kind of, you're already those crystals. Like we're literally an alchemic kind of process. As humans, we have the threefold flame, which is love, wisdom, and power within our heart, and we have the 7 chakras. And so through that process, we actually kind of embody the devic principles based on what we need to learn from that and where it's most relevant, because that diva will know what we actually need to work on. So that's why it's so all-encompassing when you have a liquid crystal for 21 days or 28 days really, because you're embodying that frequency, which is all pervasive. And so whatever needs to come through will, sometimes it will get kind of messy through that process, but hopefully by the end of the 21 days, if you're taking your remedies morning and night and you're following through that process, you'll see a resolution that occurs towards that last week.
So how does someone go about doing, like, if they, like, I know Holly, I know her brain's like going like, I need some liquid crystals. How does someone go about working with you or Justin to do the liquid crystals?
Angie, I was literally going to ask that, so thank you. You know me so well.
I was exactly thinking the same thing.
I know, and Mom too. I could
crystals.
I'm like, I answer your questions before you ask them.
She's tapped in. So you basically need a liquid crystal practitioner to prescribe liquid crystals, or Justin has a program which is really, really amazing, and it's been going for 4 years, and it's very rare to be prescribed directly from Justin. Like, he's not necessarily opened himself up as a practitioner directly to people because he's been teaching people how to become practitioners, but it's called Nature Sync. And so you can join up. It's a monthly process, and you get sent your remedies that he prescribes. You can choose to be either Nature Sync, which is just the crystal for each day, which is like every day is a new crystal. We move through different cycles of elements, or you can also that plus have personal prescriptions that link you in with the group consciousness. As I haven't been making liquid crystals for maybe the last couple of years, just because I've been writing and working on my creation practices like modality and things like that. But I am considering opening up a space where people could maybe do a month together as a group or something like that down the track, but I'll just keep people posted. But definitely Nature Sync is a good place to check out, because he also puts activations on every day. Like he's such an amazing writer. You can also work with the cards. So you can buy the Liquid Crystal Oracle deck online, usually on Amazon or anything like that. And you can start working with the cards, like by putting that he's got like card placements where you can put them on the body, exactly what they do. You can, there's beautiful Devic messages within them. And you can even put them underneath your pillow when you go to sleep. So you can ask the Devic to come through and pass messages to you while you're having your dreaming. So there's lots of ways you can interact with them. You don't necessarily have to take a liquid crystal, but I definitely would say like taking a liquid crystal and continuing that process is pretty amazing.
Yeah. Well,
Natasha, what was the name of the cards again?
They're called the Liquid Crystal Oracle Deck by Justin
Okay.
Moikiva Asar.
Mom's already on Amazon right now. She's
Yeah, it's a purple book. I'll show you the image of it's that. That's probably
okay.
Yeah. So it looks like that. So that's like the Devic kind of thing. And then in each, you get the cards, which are each crystal Devic presence. And that's the arc diva of that crystal. And it's 77 crystals within that particular modality. He's got other modalities that stack up and are symbiotic to each other. So yeah, it's been pretty amazing. I did a lot of study within his stuff, like liquid trees, star child crystals, like so many different branches within the one kind of, I guess you call it a tree of life.
Okay. Sounds amazing. And Belinda, when you were doing your computer, like she gave an amazing testimony, and I wish I would have read it, because it was just, I mean, she had some profound experiences from it. So it's amazing.
Yeah. Belinda's amazing. Yeah, she's beautiful. Like when I've done my full day circles, we don't just do the circle, we do liquid crystals together as a group for the next 28 days, and we do altar practices together. So there's a lot. It's like a way of kind of creating a support system for each and every one of them, everyone in the group, because sometimes taking your first liquid crystal can kind of, it really can, like, if there's things that are impending to be dealt with, it can really throw you around a little bit. At times it can bring up certain sort of realizations, or you can be quite shocked at what you see that you haven't been able to see, because the crystals are like the wisdom flame, animals are the power flame, and plants are the love flame. So when you're taking a crystal, or when you're working with a crystal, there's an element of learning around wisdom, or learning how to sit back and observe. When you're working with an animal, they're teaching you about power, they're animated, they're showing you different things about how to utilize your power. Yeah. And then when you're working with a tree, you're sitting with the tree and the life force of the tree, and the tree is holding you in a place of love, and presence.
So do you think that like working with the cards is a good way to start, and then
definitely
put your crystals in?
Yeah, definitely. The cards are amazing. You really are having a direct interaction with that Devic presence. It's just that for people that are maybe a little bit less sensitive, it might be sometimes a bit harder to feel it initially. But as you continue to communicate with the Devic presences in the cards, you'll actually, you do start to notice, and you start to feel the energies that are coming in. Sometimes it just takes some presence to really observe.
Does anyone else have any questions?
Did you create this beautiful painting behind you?
Yeah.
Love it.
Oh my God, I've been looking at that painting the whole time, and I thought, oh my, I really like that painting.
Oh, it's gorgeous. I'm obsessed with it a little bit. You're so talented.
Thank you. I've got all my paintings on my website actually, and they're all in collections. This one's actually not on there because this was done in a live art experience. So I was painting in a sort of open space, and it was just what came through with all of these people that kept talking to me and like while I was painting. And there was other painters and artists doing things as well, so people just got to walk around and just observe people doing art practice. So that's what came through. And it's interesting that it was such a divine feminine energy, because it was kind of like at a nightclub but like made into an art space for a period of time. So I was like, I obviously needed some feminine energy coming in. So yeah, I've kept this as one of my kind of healing, because whenever I look at it, she just kind of is very soothing.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Very
Thank
Beautiful.
you.
You're welcome.
Does anyone else have any questions? Why is this being all quiet?
I was just going to say it's funny because when you were talking about things we're not good at and we shut ourselves down, the first thing I thought of was art. I suck at art and I wish I could do that, but maybe I
Oh.
need to try harder.
And just remember, like, you don't suck at art. You're doing creative things in all different ways. You might not realize that you're being creative. So look for the areas in your life and start where you're already being creative. Like, are you creative in the way you go for a walk and like the way you explore? Are you creative in how you organize your space, your home? Start with those sort of spaces and then build your way into doing some art practice. I always say doing abstract art is good because there is no outcome that you're trying to get to, and you can actually just experience what it is to just use color, just like whatever color comes to mind. Just have a whole bunch of pencils and just scribble, and don't feel like it needs to be good or bad or anything. Just explore what colors are speaking to you, and then you'll notice sometimes you might just want all different shades of pink, and you'll be like, okay, like something's going on with the pink. What's that about? And that can be a form of communication with spirit.
I love
Holly,
that.
I was painting rocks for a long time.
Really?
Really?
Yes, I painted a lot of rocks, different just scenes that would come into my head, and I put them on rocks. And I don't know, it just
Shells?
my sister was doing it, and she said, "I think you really like it." Well, I was resistant at first, and then when we got together for like a little family reunion, I thought, "Okay, I'll try it." And then I really got into it. Now I've got all this stuff. I haven't done it for a while, but I've got all this over there to be able to do rocks.
Oh,
Awesome. What kind of scenes did you paint on the rocks?
Some of them were beach scenes. I did a nest of bird eggs. I don't know. I just looked at a picture and I thought, okay, I'm going to try that. I did
Get
it.
this one. I don't know if you
Yeah.
guys can see it.
Oh, wow. That's
Oh yeah,
beautiful.
I did a Mary Poppins.
Yeah.
Wow, that's beautiful.
that is
But
beautiful.
Amazing that you did that.
I
Did you
just
get really into it?
I did let's see if I can do this. I don't want to get on camera, but um
Come on, Linda.
I'll pick up. I did it on some shells too, and I don't know if it'll show up or not if I turn my camera on, but I'm going to turn it around and you can just see. I'll give you an example of each one of them. So, um, and then I just sometimes would just write something on there,
Yeah. It's
like faith, hope, whatever.
yeah, that's awesome. You're using frequencies by using the colors and then the words. It's like you're just kind of it's a self-healing practice.
Yeah, I don't know. Does this show up?
I can't see it.
Shall I put a spotlight
Oh,
on?
oh, there we go. Oh, wow. They're beautiful.
I did that, and then the bird nest. And
Wonderful.
then this is one of the beach thing, bird on it.
Oh,
Wow.
that's cute. I love birds. Those
Yeah,
Wow, they're beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing,
you're welcome.
Linda.
But that when you were talking about being creative, it's just like I've not been an artist or anything in my life, but I know when Angie was pregnant with her first child, we decided to make nursery, and she wanted like beach and all this stuff. I mean, my God, we painted such stuff on the wall, and I thought, where is this coming from? Because I'd never drawn anything before.
That's awesome. You know,
But
I think like
we
images are symbols, you know, and they
no,
work through us. So when we're all creative, like you're a creator in life, like we just don't always realize it because we don't have that experience of like being sort of artistic in the way that we've been told is artistic, I guess.
right, right. And you just start doing it, and then I started to paint a picture, which I haven't got the rest of it yet, but I started painting a picture. I can't get certain things right on it. So I just stare at it and think, okay, this is not right, but of my near death experience.
Oh,
So,
wow. That's
yeah.
beautiful.
You should show it, Mom.
And, huh?
You should show it.
Uh, yeah, it's very generic. I can't get it
Generic.
right. Yeah, well, I can't get it
It just
right. All
maybe
right.
it's timing too. Like I've had paintings that a lot of my paintings are related to sacred places on the earth, and it's a really interesting story of how that I was already kind of doing that, but how that kind of got reinforced by a really incredible shaman who I met in North New Zealand. And he, you know, how I met him, he just turned up on my right side of my shoulder while I was painting. And how that all came about, I'll have to tell it another time. But yeah, the energy in which comes through from whatever it is that you're tapping into, if it's your near death experience or death experience, it's like there's an aspect or symbolic aspect to it, you know, so it's really
Right.
powerful. I've got
All
Fluffy
right,
here.
I'm gonna try to put it on camera. I don't know that it'll work, but tell me if you can see it.
Here, I gotta put you back on the.
Okay.
Wait a minute. I gotta put you back on the spotlight. There we go.
Oh wow, Jesus,
Oh, I love
beautiful.
that.
It's
Yeah,
beautiful.
I can't get his hair right. I can't get my hair right. But these are all the people that were there, like the souls. They were everywhere. They were
Wow,
everywhere.
that's really beautiful. I love that. It's so symbolic, and I love that you've captured so much in it.
And this is symbolic right here because I was given a choice.
Yeah.
And I almost took his hand, almost touched it. It was only just like that far away. And I pulled back and told him I couldn't come
Wow.
You.
because I had to go back and take care of Angie
You had
because
purpose. You
she
had
was a
things to
baby.
finish. Yeah. Oh, wow. That's beautiful. I'm so grateful. Thank you so much for sharing that painting. It's really good.
It just it's not quite right. I mean, I keep trying to think, okay, what do I need to do to this? I add to it, and I'll just stand and stare at it and think, okay, it'll come to me. It'll come to me.
Yeah. I think sometimes we overthink paintings too. Like I know what that's like as someone who's painted a lot, and
Yeah.
it's like you need to just step away from it for a period of time, like either have it somewhere subconsciously where you're connecting with it without fully realizing it, so then eventually it just drops in. Or sometimes our idea as a human is that we need to fix something or that it needs to be better, but that's also about us. That's like how we are projecting onto something, and so sometimes it is actually already done, we just don't know it's done. So that it
Well,
depends on what you feel,
yeah,
but you know, it'd be interesting to see if it is really done or if you really need to add anything more.
I know that, and it's been quite a while since I even touched it with paint. But it just it, it's I guess like a perfectionist on things, and I think that's part of what it is, that I
That's
think, okay, that just doesn't quite look right. It's not exactly aligned right or something. And then I'm thinking maybe it is done, maybe it
it is.
is.
Yeah, I feel it is done. That's my when I look at it, the
Yeah,
symbol, everything in it, the feeling is in it. So what else are you trying to achieve, you know? And I think as humans,
perfection,
it can be perfection.
perfection.
Yeah, yeah, perfection. But what is perfection? You know, is it our idea of
Yeah.
perfection or is it spirit's idea of perfection?
Exactly. I think I should probably just let it go and just say that was my experience, and, just leave it at that.
Well,
I think it's perfect.
yeah. Natasha knew it was Jesus, so I mean,
Yeah.
you didn't even say who it was, and she's like, Jesus.
It
Jesus came
was.
through very
With,
strong.
yeah.
Yeah. I don't doubt that it's Jesus. I'm careful when I say things as well. So like, yeah,
Well,
you
it's pretty
really did
obvious.
convey
I
that
mean,
energy.
it's pretty obvious who it is, but I mean,
You never know.
but I don't
If it
know.
wasn't
But
painted in a way that's symbolically related to the light and the dark and like all of the different people, I think maybe it could be misunderstood. That's why I think it is kind of complete, because it
yeah,
told the
okay.
story, it did its story.
Okay. Thank you for the critique.
No, no, it's fine.
No, I
I'm in
love
no
it.
position.
No, I love it because I guess I needed somebody else's perspective to think what you would think when you saw it, because to me it just needs something else, but I don't know what. And I just hadn't figured it out, and maybe you're right. Maybe it doesn't need anything else, and that's just in my head, that it needs something else.
Sometimes the other thing is just letting go and letting God, like letting it be
True.
what it is. I've had that experience with art a lot too, and there's a point where you're like, okay, that one didn't take anywhere near as long as this one, and sometimes you have this thing where you're like, I should be working harder at this for it to be
Yeah.
better. It's like
Yeah.
it is that sort of program around productivity, and I think some of the most like childlike art is sometimes the most uplifting because it's very
Yeah.
pure, and you
Yeah.
don't feel so like bogged down in just detail. So it's letting it have its like balance, and I feel like it has the story and it's conveyed it very well and it's balanced. So you've done well.
Thank you.
No worries, Linda.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Well, this has been beautiful. I loved having you. I'd love to have you come back. Of course, we have so many things we can talk about. We talked about so many awesome things today. So, is there any like parting wisdom or something that you could say today as we wrap this up?
I would honestly just say, connect with spirit, communicate, express yourself through colors or art in a natural way without feeling like there has to be an outcome, and just ask and just keep an open conversation with spirit. That would be like the initial point of any person who wants to walk their purpose. Just being receptive, like what you said, Angie, earlier, about being receptive to not receive it, to like not being attached to anything but allowing things to come in. And I think that's probably what I would just suggest in terms of any creative practice, even if it's like organizing your house or decorating things or whatever. Just like being receptive and allowing things to flow and not feeling like you have to get a specific answer necessarily immediately. It can just happen in little stages, like what you talked about with the onion, like little layers of healing.
Okay, I have a quick question. Sorry.
Okay.
um, just when we're talking about manifesting, like you said, there's a lot of everyone's kind of focused on manifesting right now. It's a big buzzword, and everyone has their own ideas of how you manifest, and this is the way you do it. And I grew up in a very religious household where there was very much you humble yourself and you ask and you kind of almost beg, for what you want. And then, the manifesting crowd is more like, no, you don't ask because that conveys lack, and you don't want to convey lack. It's more like you command, or you just state like, this is what it is. And I don't know, maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe it's just getting your intention out there and it doesn't necessarily matter the way you say it or do it. What are your thoughts on that?
I honestly feel that you could just say, this is something that I feel, especially if it's something that really resonates with you and you've been, you think you've thought about it a lot. It's really like deeply, it's not just something on a whim. You can be like, if this is for my highest good, could you please bring this through? If it isn't for my highest good, then show me what is, and show me the direction. And it's just like having an open conversation rather than it being one thing or the other. And I think with manifestation, it depends. Like, this could complicate things by saying this, but it really depends on your energy too. Some people are more closer to the earth energy. So they're much better. They're like not better, but their natural gift and their natural purpose and service to earth is actually manifesting. Some energies are higher, closer to spirit, that they're not necessarily here to bring things through just physically. They're more here to bring a message through from spirit. So it's also about where you sit energetically, and that's not a higher or lower thing in any way, shape, or form. It's all just service. But we come in, earth needs us to be really good at what we come in to do, and we always come in, you know, with a certain sort of energy, usually the same energy, not our life purpose, but we come in with a certain sort of directive. And in this directive, we are suited to certain types of sort of expressions. And so I think some people that might be teaching manifestation might actually be very much in service to manifestation and in that vibration. But for me personally, my purpose isn't necessarily always about bringing something through in a finite way. My purpose is usually hearing things or tones or things in spirit, and then finding a way to express those things. Yes, that is a form of manifestation. If I make a song or bring it through from spirit and then I put it on as a track, but it might not necessarily look the same for somebody else as what it does for me. And I think sometimes we think, this person's done it, why can't I do it? And I just think, well, we're all so unique and also different and individual, that some things are really suited to certain people's energies, and some people are suited to other gifts. And maybe some of those gifts that people, for example, healing is moving up towards spirit. Some people are really gifted in terms of healing, but you might not recognize that in the culture because the culture is so focused on manifestation. And so I often say, you know, if when it comes to manifesting, I often say, remove the obstacles that I'm creating for myself that could be in the way of me experiencing this experience. If it's for my, you know, for my highest good, and help me learn how to work through these obstacles. I would just see it more as obstacles are kind of like shadows that play out, and like and that you've got the sort of light coming from spirit, and you don't necessarily want, and a physical thing is an obstacle in a way. Once you're manifesting, you then become responsible for another thing or another object or another purpose. So it's really like, do you want to be responsible for that? Is that really what your energy is aligned to? Is that really helpful to your life? It's not to say that it isn't. And I'm not putting down anyone for, you know, talking about manifestation in any way, shape, or form. I just think sometimes we compare ourselves to other people or what they should do. I think you could find your own unique way to connect with what that is. And that could be really different to how somebody else teaches it online.
Okay, beautiful. That's how that everything you said is how I intuitively kind of feel too. So that's beautiful. Thank you.
It's confirmation.
Yes.
We all do it.
All right.
Thank you, Holly.
Thank you, Holly. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Mama, everybody for being here, and Belinda and Anastasia that were here too. So we're going to wrap this up. We're going to have Natasha back. So watch for promos for Natasha to be back. March 8th, Georgina Grace is going to be on. So look for promos for that. It'll be March 9th if you're in Australia. And thank everybody for being here. Thank Natasha for being here. It's been great.
Thank you so much for having me, Angie. I so appreciate it.
Thank you, Natasha. Very nice meeting you.
So lovely meeting you too, and you, Holly.
Until next time, guys. See you later.
Bye.